Emma, a 10-year-old girl, loved the playground near her home. To her, it wasn't just a place to play, it was a sanctuary, a space where she could laugh freely and let her imagination run wild. The playground had always been filled with joy. The swings that sent her soaring, the slides that brought endless excitement, and the soft grass where she and her friends lay, talking about their dreams. Her best friend, Liam, was always by her side. They had known each other for as long as they could remember. Every afternoon, they would meet at the playground, running through the jungle gym, playing tag, and making up games only they understood. Their friendship was effortless and pure, built on shared adventures and unbreakable trust. But everything began to change when Liam's mother, Mrs. Margaret, started bringing him to the playground more often. Emma slowly noticed the way Mrs. Margaret looked at her. Not with warmth, but with cold, assessing eyes. She didn't understand why at first, but then Liam started acting differently too. He still played with her, but was more hesitant, his laughter less frequent when his mother was watching. Whenever Emma approached, Mrs. Margaret would call Liam away. It started subtly, simple excuses like, "Liam, we have to go home now," or "Liam, come here for a second." But over time, it became more direct. One afternoon, as Emma ran towards Liam, eager to show him the new skipping rope she had gotten, Mrs. Margaret stepped in between them. "Liam, come here right now," she ordered, her tone sharp. Liam hesitated, looking between his mother and Emma. Emma smiled, expecting him to brush it off and come play, but instead, he lowered his gaze and walked away without a word. Emma's heart ached. It was a feeling she couldn't quite understand, a deep sadness creeping into her chest. She had done nothing wrong. Why was he being pulled away? She tried not to let it bother her. She told herself it was just a coincidence, that maybe Liam was tired or had to go home early, but it happened again. And again. Each time Emma got close, Mrs. Margaret's gaze hardened, and she would find a reason to separate them. If Emma sat on the swings, Liam was called over to the slides. If she ran towards the jungle gym, Liam was suddenly needed by his mother. Emma started feeling something she had never felt before, like she didn't belong. The playground, once her happiest place, now felt different. The laughter of other children still echoed, but it no longer felt like it included her. She began sitting alone on the swing, watching from a distance as Liam played with other kids. It wasn't just Liam. She started noticing the way other parents looked at her too. Quick glances, hushed whispers when she passed by. Conversations stopped when she got too close. One day, as she sat quietly under a tree, she overheard a group of mothers talking. "That girl, I don't understand why they let her play here," one woman muttered. "Exactly. Are kids playing with her? Who knows what they'll pick up?" another said with irritation. A third woman, her voice softer but no less sharp, sighed. "Maybe no one says it, but she's just different. We're not used to that here." Emma's stomach twisted. Different? What did they mean? The weight of their words settled on her shoulders. She had never thought of herself as different before. She had always just been Emma, a little girl who loved to play. But now, she felt like she was being pushed out of the only place she had ever known as home. Liam, once her closest friend, had grown distant. He barely met her eyes anymore. One afternoon, she tried to talk to him, but he only mumbled an excuse and walked away. "Liam," she called after him, "did I do something wrong?" He hesitated for a moment, but didn't turn around. "No, Emma. I have to go." Emma felt tears sting her eyes, but she refused to cry. Not here. Not in front of them. Mrs. Margaret always stood at the edge of the playground, arms crossed, watching. Emma could feel her disapproving gaze, like a silent barrier that separated her from the rest of the children. One day, Emma gathered all her courage and approached Mrs. Margaret directly. She wasn't sure what she would say, only that she needed to understand. "Mrs. Margaret," she said, her voice small but steady, "why don't you want Liam to play with me?" Mrs. Margaret looked down at her, her expression unreadable. Then, after a long silence, she sighed. "Children like you don't belong here," she said coldly. Emma felt like the air had been knocked out of her lungs. "Children like me." Mrs. Margaret's gaze didn't waver. "It's best if you stay away. Liam doesn't need bad influences." Emma swallowed the lump in her throat. She wanted to ask what she had done wrong, why she was suddenly not welcome in the place she had always called home. But the words stuck in her throat. She had always believed that the playground belonged to everyone, that friendship wasn't about differences, but about who you cared for and who cared for you. But now, she was being told she didn't belong, that she wasn't. The worst part wasn't Mrs. Margaret's words. It was that no one spoke up for her. The other parents, the other children, they all heard, they all saw, and they did nothing. Emma felt a wave of loneliness wash over her. She wasn't just being separated from Liam, she was being erased, as if she had never belonged there at all. That night, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The laughter she once loved, the place that had felt like home, now felt like a distant memory. But Emma wasn't ready to give up. She wasn't ready to walk away. If they didn't want her there, she would prove that she had just as much right as anyone else. She wasn't going to disappear, not without a fight. The next morning, Emma sat at the breakfast table, staring at her bowl of cereal. She stirred it absent-mindedly, her spoon making small ripples in the milk. The events of the previous day still clung to her thoughts, making her feel heavy. Her mother, noticing her lack of appetite, leaned in and placed a gentle hand on hers. "Emma, sweetheart, is something wrong? You haven't touched your food." Emma hesitated, then met her mother's warm gaze. She wanted to tell her everything, that the playground no longer felt like home, that Liam had abandoned her, that Mrs. Margaret had said she didn't belong. But the words stuck in her throat. "I just don't feel hungry," she murmured, forcing a small smile. Her mother watched her for a moment, but didn't press further. "All right, but if you need to talk, I'm here." Emma nodded, but deep down, she wasn't sure talking would change anything. School wasn't much better. When she walked into the classroom, Liam was already seated. Their eyes met for a brief second before he quickly looked away. Emma's heart sank. She had hoped that maybe, after sleeping on it, he would have found the courage to talk to her. But he didn't. She took her usual seat and opened her notebook, though the words on the page blurred together. All around her, laughter and conversations filled the air, but she felt apart from it all, like she was trapped behind an invisible wall. At recess, Emma debated whether to go to the playground or hide in the library, but something in her refused to give up. She walked toward the playground, heart pounding, determined to act as if nothing had changed. But everything had. As soon as she stepped onto the wood chip, she felt the stares. Parents on the benches watched her with careful disinterest. The children kept their distance. Even those she had once played with gave her fleeting glances before running off in the other direction. Emma spotted Liam standing with a group of boys near the slide. Taking a deep breath, she approached. "Hey, Liam." He turned, his expression unreadable. "Emma." For a second, hope flickered inside her. Maybe things weren't as bad as she thought. Maybe they could go back to how they were before. "Want me to go on the swings?" Before Liam could answer, one of the boys beside him snickered. "I don't think so." Emma felt her stomach drop. "What?" Liam shifted uncomfortably, looking anywhere but at her. Maybe later, Emma." The boy beside him smirked. "Or never." Emma's face burned. "Why are you acting like this? We've always been friends." Liam still refused to meet her gaze. "I don't know. Maybe it's just better this way." Emma took a step back, feeling like the ground beneath her had vanished. "Better for who?" No answer. The group of boys laughed and walked away, leaving her standing there, exposed. Her fingers curled into fists. She had lost Liam, not because of anything she had done, but because of what others had decided for him. The worst part was that he let them. Fighting tears, she turned on her heel and walked away, her heart pounding with a mixture of hurt and frustration. She wouldn't cry, not here, not in front of them. She didn't stop walking until she was far from the playground, her breath shaky. For the first time, she truly understood what it meant to be alone. The rest of the day dragged on. During lunch, she sat at the edge of the cafeteria, pushing food around her tray. No one joined her. She thought about going over to Liam, but he was already surrounded by others, laughing like nothing had changed. The weight in her chest grew heavier. By the time the final bell rang, Emma was exhausted, not from schoolwork, but from carrying the loneliness that had settled inside her. She trudged home, her footsteps slow and uncertain. The sky was painted with hues of orange and pink, but the beauty of it was lost on her. When she reached her front porch, she hesitated before stepping inside. Her mother was in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared dinner. "You're home early," her mother said, turning to smile at her. Emma nodded, dropping her backpack by the door. "Yeah." Her mother studied her for a moment. "Did something happen at school?" Emma wanted to lie, to say everything was fine, but the weight in her chest was too much. She sighed. Liam isn't my friend anymore. Her mother's face softened. Oh, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. Did he say that? Not exactly, Emma admitted, sitting at the kitchen table. But he won't talk to me, and when I tried, his friends... She stopped, biting her lip. Her mother walked over and knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from Emma's face. People can be unkind, especially when they're afraid of standing out. But that doesn't mean you did anything wrong. Then why does it feel like I did? Emma whispered. Her mother sighed, pulling her into a warm embrace. 'Cause losing a friend always hurts, especially when it's not your fault. Emma closed her eyes, letting herself be held. For the first time all day, she felt safe. But the ache in her heart remained. She wasn't sure it would ever go away. That night, as she lay in bed, she stared at the ceiling, wondering if things would ever go back to normal, if Liam would ever come back, if the playground would ever feel like home again. She wasn't sure, but she knew one thing. She wasn't ready to give up. Emma sat on her bed that night, hugging her knees to her chest, the weight of the day pressed down on her, the loneliness wrapping around her like a thick blanket. She replayed Liam's rejection over and over in her mind, each time feeling the sting a little deeper. She had always thought their friendship was unbreakable, that no matter what, Liam would stand by her. But today had proven otherwise. Maybe she should stop trying. Maybe she should just let go. But then a small voice inside her whispered, no. She had done nothing wrong. She had every right to play on that playground, to have friends, to be treated just like everyone else. She wouldn't let them push her out. The next morning, she walked to school with her head held high. Even as a storm brewed inside her, she wouldn't show them that they had hurt her. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction. When she arrived at school, she went straight to her desk, ignoring the stares and whispers. Liam was already there, sitting with his new group of friends. She didn't look at him. If he didn't want to talk to her, then she wouldn't waste her energy trying. The first few classes passed in a blur, but when the lunch bell rang, Emma took a deep breath and made her way to the cafeteria. She wasn't going to hide. She picked up her tray and scanned the room. As expected, Liam was sitting at a table with his new friends. She forced herself to look away and found an empty spot near the back. As she sat down, she heard a voice behind her. Mind if I sit here? Emma looked up to see a girl she barely knew, Sophie, from her math class. She had curly, dark hair and a quiet presence. Emma nodded. Sure. But Sophie sat down and started unpacking her lunch. I saw what happened yesterday with Liam and those guys. Emma stiffened but didn't respond. She wasn't sure she wanted to talk about it. It was really unfair, Sophie continued. You didn't do anything wrong. Emma sighed. Tell that to them. Sophie poked at her sandwich with a frown. Some people are just scared to stand out. They'd rather follow the crowd than do the right thing. Emma looked at her, surprised. You really think that? Sophie nodded. I know it. I used to be friends with them too until they decided I wasn't cool enough. Emma blinked. I didn't know that. Sophie shrugged. It's fine. I'm better off. They're not real friends. A small smile tugged at the corner of Emma's lips. For the first time in days, she felt a little less alone. The rest of lunch passed more easily than she expected. By the time the bell rang, Emma felt a flicker of hope. Maybe she had lost Liam, but that didn't mean she had to be alone. But just as she was beginning to feel okay, the universe had other plans. At recess, Emma walked toward the playground, determined not to let fear keep her away. She had every right to be there. As she stepped onto the wood chips, a group of boys, including the ones from yesterday, turned toward her. One of them, a tall boy named Ryan, smirked. Look who's back. Emma ignored him and walked toward the swings. Didn't you get the message? Another boy sneered. You don't belong here. Emma's heart pounded, but she kept her head high. I belong wherever I want to be. Ryan stepped forward. No, you don't. Before Emma could react, he reached out and shoved her. She stumbled back, her foot catching on a root. She hit the ground hard, dirt and wood chips digging into her hands. A few kids gasped, but no one stepped forward. Emma blinked up at Ryan, shock and anger warring inside her. Ryan smirked. Now do you get it? Emma's hands curled into fists. She had two choices. Stay down or get up. She got up. Brushing dirt off her jeans, she met Ryan's gaze with unwavering determination. You can push me, but you can't break me. For the first time, Ryan looked caught off guard. What did you say? I said you can't break me. Emma's voice was steady, loud enough for everyone to hear. You can try to shove me, to scare me, to push me out, but I'm not going anywhere. A murmur spread through the crowd. Ryan's smirk faltered. He opened his mouth, then closed it, looking uncertain. Emma turned and walked away, her heart hammering. She had no idea if she had won, but she knew one thing. She wasn't afraid anymore. But the fight wasn't over yet. The next day at school, Emma felt the shift. Whispers followed her wherever she went, but this time they weren't only full of judgment. Some of them carried curiosity, others admiration. During lunch, Sophie joined her again along with another girl named Rachel. They talked about books, favorite movies, and things unrelated to the drama that had unfolded. Emma was beginning to feel normal again until Liam approached their table. He hesitated before speaking. "Emma, can we talk?" Sophie and Rachel exchanged glances but didn't say anything. Emma met Liam's gaze. "What is there to talk about?" Liam shuffled his feet. "About yesterday? About everything?" Emma narrowed her eyes. "Now you want to talk? Where were you when they shoved me to the ground? When they tried to make me feel like I was nothing?" Liam swallowed hard. I should have said something." Emma shook her head. "Yeah, you should have." A silence stretched between them. Liam looked down, shame coloring his face. "I miss being your friend." Emma's heart twisted. She missed him too, but things had changed. "I don't need a friend who stands by and watches while I get hurt," she said. "I need a friend who stands up for me, even when it's hard." Liam's shoulders slumped. He gave a small nod. "I get it. I really am sorry." Emma studied him for a long moment. Maybe he did mean it. Maybe he would change. But she wasn't sure she was ready to let him back in just yet. "We'll see," she finally said. Liam gave her a sad smile before turning and walking away. Emma took a deep breath and turned back to Sophie and Rachel. "So, what were we talking about?" They picked up their conversation as if nothing had happened, and for the first time in a long time, Emma felt at peace. She hadn't won the battle completely, but she was still standing, and that was enough. For now, Emma woke up the next morning with a renewed sense of purpose. She had come too far to let Ryan, Liam, or anyone else decide where she belonged. The fight wasn't just about the playground anymore. It was about proving to herself that she was strong enough to stand her ground. She wasn't just going to survive. She was going to thrive. At school, the atmosphere had shifted. Some students still whispered about her, their hushed voices trailing behind her like shadows, but others gave her small nods of acknowledgement. A few, like Sophie and Rachel, had become unexpected allies. Then there was Liam. His conflicted glances followed her through the hallways, but he said nothing. Emma wasn't sure if that made her angrier or just sad. By lunchtime, Sophie and Rachel had become her closest friends. They weren't just people she sat with, they supported her, made her feel like she belonged. Today, as they sat at their usual spot, Sophie leaned in. "We need to make a statement," she said. Rachel nodded. "You should come to the basketball game this Friday. Everyone will be there. If you sit with us, it'll show them you're not scared." Emma hesitated. The idea of being in a crowd where people had shunned her made her uneasy, but then she thought about what it would mean to stand tall despite everything. She nodded. "Okay, I'll go." When Friday arrived, Emma's nerves were on edge. The gymnasium was packed with students and parents. Sophie and Rachel led her to the stands, sitting right in the middle where everyone could see them. The murmur started almost immediately. Ryan and his group sat a few rows ahead. When he turned and saw Emma, his eyes narrowed. Emma met his gaze head-on, refusing to look away. She wasn't backing down. Not today. The game started, and for a while, Emma managed to enjoy it. The energy in the gym was infectious, and for a moment she felt like a regular student again. But during halftime, things took a turn. Ryan walked up the stands, stopping right in front of Emma. "Didn't think you'd actually show up," he said, smirking. Emma crossed her arms. "I told you I'm not going anywhere." Ryan chuckled, shaking his head. "You really don't get it, do you?" Sophie stood up. "Leave her alone, Ryan." Ryan ignored her, his focus solely on Emma. "You think just sitting here changes things? You're still not one of us." Emma's heart pounded, but she forced herself to stay calm. "I don't need to be one of you. I just need to be me." A few students nearby murmured in agreement. Ryan's smirk faltered for a second, but he quickly recovered. "You're really not scared, huh?" Emma shook her head. "Not anymore." Ryan looked at her for a long moment before shrugging. "Whatever. He turned and walked back down the stands, but the tension in the air remained. After the game, as Emma walked toward the parking lot, Liam finally caught up to her. "Hey," he said hesitantly. Emma glanced at him. "Hey." Liam shifted uncomfortably. "That was brave. What you did tonight." Emma studied him. "Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's standing up even when you're afraid." Liam exhaled. I should have stood up for you sooner." Emma nodded. "Yeah, you should have." A silence stretched between them before Liam finally said, "I want to fix things." Emma wanted to believe him, but trust wasn't rebuilt in a day. "We'll see," she said. As she walked away, she felt something she hadn't in a long time. Hope. The fight wasn't over, but she was stronger than she had ever been. The following Monday at school, Emma felt an undeniable shift. More students than ever before nodded at her in the hallways, small but meaningful acknowledgments that they had seen her stand up for herself. She could tell some were reevaluating what they had thought about her before. But during lunch, a surprising moment happened. A girl named Leah, who had always sat with Ryan's group, hesitated before walking toward Emma's table. Sophie and Rachel watched carefully as she approached. Leah cleared her throat. "Hey, Emma." Emma looked up, surprised. "Hey." Leah hesitated, then sat down across from her. "I just wanted to say, that was cool, what you did at the game. Standing up to Ryan like that." Emma studied her. "You're friends with him." Leah bit her lip. "Yeah, but doesn't mean I agree with him. Sometimes he takes things too far." Emma didn't know what to say to that. Instead, she nodded. Leah took it as permission to stay, joining their conversation, hesitantly at first, but eventually blending in. The cracks in Ryan's control were beginning to show. Later that afternoon, as Emma packed her bag for the day, she felt a presence beside her. Looking up, she found Ryan leaning against the lockers, his expression unreadable. She didn't flinch. "What do you want?" Ryan sighed. "I don't get you." Emma raised an eyebrow. "What's there to get?" Ryan rubbed the back of his neck. You don't quit?" Emma tilted her head. "Why does that bother you so much?" He hesitated before answering. "Because people usually do." Emma crossed her arms. "Well, I'm not most people." Ryan exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "Yeah, I guess you're not." For the first time, Emma saw something different in his expression. Not anger, not superiority, but maybe respect. It was fleeting, but it was there. Ryan pushed himself off the lockers. "See you around, Carter." Emma smirked. "See you around, Ryan." As he walked away, Emma realized something. She hadn't just stood her ground. She had changed something. Maybe it was just a small shift, but it was enough. She had proven she wasn't afraid. She had shown everyone that she belonged. And, most importantly, she had proved it to herself. Emma walked into school the next day feeling a change in the air. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't walking with her head down, expecting whispers and sneers. Instead, there was a quiet shift. Some students offered nods of acknowledgement, while others looked at her with curiosity rather than disdain. It wasn't universal acceptance, but it was something. She wasn't naive enough to believe that everything had suddenly changed overnight, but she had learned that change didn't happen all at once. It started with small shifts, quiet moments, and the courage to keep showing up. At lunch, Sophie and Rachel were already seated when Emma arrived. But what surprised her was Leah sitting beside them, chatting as if she had always been part of their group. Emma hesitated for a moment before taking her seat. "Hey, Leah." Leah gave a small, hesitant smile. "Hey." Emma exchanged a glance with Sophie, who gave a subtle nod of reassurance. "Leah was just telling us about Ryan," Sophie said. Emma raised an eyebrow. Ryan?" Leah sighed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Yeah, it's been different since the game, like off his usual routine. He usually jokes around like nothing ever bothers him, but yesterday, when I asked him what was wrong, all he said was, 'Emma doesn't quit.'" Emma blinked. "That's what he said," Leah nodded. "Yeah. And coming from Ryan, that's not nothing." Rachel leaned forward, intrigued. "I think it's throwing him off. He's used to people caving when he pushes them." "But you didn't?" Emma exhaled. "And now he doesn't know what to do." Leah hesitated before adding, "I'm not saying he's going to change overnight, but I think I think you've made him question himself. Emma wasn't sure what to do with that information. She hadn't set out to change Ryan. She hadn't been looking for approval. But knowing that her refusal to back down had unsettled him, that was something. After lunch, Emma walked down the hallway toward her locker when she noticed Ryan leaning casually against the lockers near the entrance. Their eyes met, and for a moment neither of them moved. Then, unexpectedly, he spoke. "I still don't get you." Emma folded her arms. "Not my problem." Ryan let out a dry chuckle. "Yeah, I figured you'd say that." She remained still, waiting for him to continue. Ryan looked away, tapping his fingers against the metal locker. "You don't back down. Most people do." Emma tilted her head slightly. "And that bothers you?" Ryan let out a breath. "Maybe." Emma didn't know what she had expected from him, but honesty wasn't high on the list. "Why does it matter to you?" Ryan hesitated before answering. "Because people like me don't usually lose." Emma raised an eyebrow. "And you think you've lost?" Ryan scoffed. "I don't know, but I do know that you're still here." Emma studied him for a moment. "Yeah, I am." Ryan didn't say anything else. Instead, he just nodded before pushing himself off the lockers and walking away. Emma watched him go, feeling something shift inside her. Maybe, just maybe, she had made an impact. Not just on Ryan, but on everything. That night as she lay in bed, she thought about everything that had happened. The rejection, the isolation, the struggle to stand her ground. Every moment had led her here, and she wasn't afraid anymore. The next morning, when Emma arrived at school, she noticed something unexpected. More students than before were openly acknowledging her. It wasn't just Sophie, Rachel, and Leah anymore. Others, people she barely knew, were smiling at her, saying hi, treating her like she was part of something instead of an outsider. Even Liam hesitated when he passed her in the hallway. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, but then closed it again and walked away. Emma felt a pang of sadness, but also acceptance. Maybe Liam wasn't ready to fix things. Maybe he never would be. But she wasn't going to wait around for him to decide. Later that afternoon, she found herself at the playground. The place that had once felt like a battleground now seemed peaceful again. Kids were playing, parents were chatting, and for the first time in weeks, Emma felt like she belonged there. Then she noticed Ryan sitting alone on one of the swings, staring at the ground. It was strange seeing him without his usual crowd. She debated whether to approach him or just leave, but something in her gut told her to stay. Taking a deep breath, she walked over. "Didn't think you'd be here," she said. Ryan glanced up, startled. He shrugged. "Didn't think you'd talk to me." Emma smirked. "Yeah, well, I don't always do what people expect." Ryan huffed a laugh. "Yeah, I've noticed." They sat in silence for a moment before Ryan spoke again. "You know, I wasn't always like this." Emma turned toward him. "Like what?" Ryan sighed. "The way I am, the way I treat people." Emma didn't respond immediately. She had spent so much time seeing Ryan as the enemy, as the person who made her life miserable. But maybe there was more to him than that. Ryan kicked at the dirt beneath his feet. "People expect things from me. They expect me to be the tough guy, the leader, the one in control, and I guess I just leaned into it." Emma considered his words. "You don't have to be what people expect." Ryan let out a bitter chuckle. "Easier said than done?" Emma nodded. "Yeah, but I think you're already changing, whether you realize it or not." Ryan didn't say anything. But for the first time since she had met him, he looked unsure. Finally, he stood up. "See you around, Carter." Emma watched him walk away, feeling a strange sense of hope, not just for herself, but maybe even for Ryan. She had fought so hard to belong, to prove she had a place, and now she wasn't just standing her ground, she was building something new. And she wasn't doing it alone. Emma walked into school the next day with a quiet confidence she hadn't felt in weeks. The storm that had surrounded her for so long seemed to be clearing, and while she knew there would still be challenges ahead, she no longer felt like she was standing alone. Sophie and Rachel greeted her at the entrance, chatting about a school project as they walked together toward the cafeteria. Emma listened, but her mind kept drifting to the playground, to Ryan, and to the conversation they had shared. There was something different about him. something unspoken, like a battle happening beneath the surface that no one else could see. As they sat at their usual lunch table, Leah joined them, her presence no longer feeling out of place. "So," she said, leaning in, "Ryan barely said a word in class today. I think you broke him, Emma." Emma smirked. I doubt that," Leah shrugged. "Well, he's been acting weird since the basketball game. He doesn't have that usual smugness anymore. It's like he's thinking." Rachel tapped her fingers on the table. "Maybe he's realizing that being a jerk isn't as fun when people stop laughing along." Sophie nodded. Or maybe Emma got through to him in some way. Emma wasn't sure how she felt about that idea. She had spent so much time fighting against Ryan that the thought of actually reaching him felt strange. But the truth was, she had seen the cracks in his armor. And maybe, just maybe, he was starting to see them too. After lunch, Emma walked through the halls, feeling a growing sense of normalcy. It wasn't that everything was perfect. There were still stares, still moments of tension. But the difference was that she no longer felt invisible. People saw her now, and they saw that she wasn't going anywhere. As she turned the corner toward her locker, she nearly collided with Liam. "Oh, hey!" he said, stepping back awkwardly. Emma adjusted the strap of her backpack. "Hey." Liam looked like he wanted to say something, but hesitated. Finally, he let out a breath. "I saw you talking to Ryan." Emma raised an eyebrow. "And?" Liam hesitated again. "And?" "I don't get it. After everything he's done to you, why would you even bother?" Emma crossed her arms. "Because people aren't just one thing, Liam." Liam frowned. "He made your life miserable. He pushed you around, made you feel like you didn't belong. Why would you give him a chance?" Emma studied him for a moment before answering. "Because I know what it feels like to be pushed out. Maybe, just maybe, he's realizing he doesn't want to be that person anymore." Liam's expression shifted, something between guilt and understanding. "I guess I never thought about it that way." Emma nodded. "Maybe you should." The silence between them stretched before Liam finally said, "I miss being your friend." Emma's heart twisted. "I miss who we used to be too." Liam swallowed hard. "Do you think we can ever get back to that?" Emma sighed. "I don't know, but if we do, it has to be real. It has to be better." Liam nodded slowly. "Yeah, I get that." As he walked away, Emma felt a strange sense of closure. She wasn't sure where she and Liam stood, but for the first time, she felt like the choice was hers. The rest of the day passed in a blur, and as the final bell rang, Emma stepped outside into the crisp afternoon air. She started toward home when she heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she found Ryan standing a few feet away, his hands in his pockets. "Hey," he said. Emma tilted her head. "Hey." Ryan shifted his weight. "Look, I'm not good at this kind of thing, but I just wanted to say that I get it now." Emma frowned. "Get what?" Ryan exhaled sharply. "Why you didn't back down? Why you kept showing up?" Emma watched him carefully. "And what do you think?" Ryan smirked, but it lacked the usual arrogance. "I think you're tougher than I gave you credit for." Emma crossed her arms. "And?" Ryan's smirk faded. "And I don't want to be that guy anymore." Emma's breath caught. She hadn't expected him to say that. Not now, maybe not ever. "You don't have to be." Ryan gave a small nod before stepping back. "See you around, Carter." As he walked away, Emma stood there for a long time, watching him disappear down the sidewalk. Maybe change wasn't immediate. Maybe it wasn't easy. But it was happening. And for the first time, she felt like they were all moving forward together. The next morning, Emma walked into school with her head held high. The weight of weeks of isolation had started to lift, and while everything wasn't perfect, it felt lighter now. She wasn't invisible anymore, and she wasn't going anywhere. As she approached her locker, Sophie and Rachel were already waiting for her. Leah joined them soon after, glancing around as if checking for someone. "Did you hear?" she asked. Ryan hasn't been hanging out with his usual group." Emma frowned. "What do you mean?" Rachel leaned in. "I saw him at lunch yesterday. He was sitting alone for a while, then left before the period was even over." Sophie smirked. "Looks like someone's having an identity crisis." Emma wasn't sure how to feel about that. Ryan had made her life miserable. but now she wasn't so sure he even knew who he was without the power he once held. At lunch, Emma's eyes automatically drifted toward the back of the cafeteria. Ryan sat alone, absently pushing food around on his tray. It was strange to see him like that, without his usual crowd, without his usual smug confidence. She hesitated before making a decision. Taking a deep breath, she walked over. "Mind if I sit?" Ryan glanced up, surprised. Sure." Emma set down her tray. "You okay?" Ryan scoffed. "You're asking me that?" Emma shrugged. "Yeah, I am," Ryan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know, Carter. I guess I don't know who I am without all of it, without people looking up to me or fearing me." Emma studied him. "Maybe that's a good thing." Ryan frowned. "Yeah? How? 'Cause now you get to decide who you really want to be." Ryan went quiet, staring at the table. For the first time, Emma saw something in his eyes that she hadn't before. Uncertainty. Vulnerability. He had spent so long hiding behind the mask of control that now, without it, he seemed lost. Finally, he nodded. "Yeah, maybe you're right." Emma smiled. "I usually am." Ryan let out a small chuckle, shaking his head. "Figures." For the rest of lunch, they sat in easy silence. It wasn't friendship. Not yet. But it was something. And for now, that was enough. Later that day, as Emma was walking to her next class, Liam caught up with her. He hesitated before speaking. "I saw you sitting with Ryan." Emma glanced at him. "Yeah? So?" Liam shifted his weight. "After everything he put you through? I don't get it. Why would you even talk to him?" Emma sighed. "Because people change. And I think he's trying." Liam frowned. "You really believe that?" Emma nodded. "Yeah, and maybe that's the difference between us. I believe people can change." Liam looked away, his jaw tightening. "I just don't want you to get hurt again." Emma softened. "I appreciate that, but this is my choice." Liam hesitated before nodding. "Okay, just be careful." Emma watched him walk away, feeling a mix of emotions. She knew Liam was struggling with everything that had happened, but she also knew she had to make her own decisions. As the school day ended, Emma found herself back at the playground, the place where everything had started. She sat on the swing, watching the younger kids run around, their laughter filling the air. It was a reminder of how simple things used to be. She was lost in thought when she heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw Ryan standing a few feet away, hands in his pockets. "You always come back here, huh?" he asked. Emma nodded. "Yeah, it's home in a way." Ryan studied the playground. "I never thought about it like that." Emma tilted her head. "Then what was it for you?" Ryan hesitated before answering. "A place to be in control." Emma wasn't surprised. "And now?" Ryan exhaled. "Now, I don't know." They sat in silence for a while, both lost in their own thoughts. Then Ryan spoke again. "I don't expect things to change overnight. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I'm trying." Emma met his gaze. "That's all anyone can do." Ryan gave a small nod before stepping back. "See you around, Carter." Emma watched him walk away, feeling something shift inside her. Maybe change wasn't immediate. Maybe it wasn't easy, but it was happening. And for the first time, she felt like they were all moving forward. The following week, Emma noticed something different. The energy at school had shifted, not just for her, but for everyone. The playground wasn't as hostile as before, the cafeteria no longer felt like a battlefield, and even though not everyone had changed, the power Ryan once held over people was fading. At lunch, Sophie, Rachel, and Leah were already seated when Emma arrived. "Ryan still keeping his distance from his old group?" Leah noted, stirring her drink with a straw. "Vito, I think he's officially out." Emma sat down and nodded. "It's weird, isn't it? Seeing him without his usual crowd." Sophie smirked. "Karma works in mysterious ways." Rachel shrugged. "Still, I have to admit, it takes guts to step away from people you've known forever." Emma thought about that. Ryan wasn't just some villain who had lost his power. He was someone trying to figure out who he was without it. And in some ways, that made her respect him more. After lunch, Emma made her way to her locker when she spotted Ryan near the entrance. He was alone, hands in his pockets, looking deep in thought. She hesitated before walking over. "Hey," she greeted. Ryan glanced up, his expression neutral. Hey. Emma leaned against the locker beside him. You doing okay? Ryan scoffed, shaking his head. Weird question coming from you. Emma smirked. Yeah, well, I ask weird questions sometimes. Ryan exhaled. I don't know, Carter. Everything just feels different. I thought losing control would be terrifying. But now, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do next. Emma considered his words. Maybe that's the point. You get to figure out who you want to be without worrying about what anyone else expects. Ryan frowned, as if he'd never considered that possibility. And what if I don't know who that is? Emma smiled. Then you start by being better than who you were? For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then he nodded slowly. Yeah, maybe I can do that. That was the closest thing to an apology Emma figured she'd ever get from him. And strangely, she was okay with that. As the final bell rang, Emma stepped outside, taking a deep breath of fresh air. She had survived something she never thought she could. She had fought for her place and had won, not by pushing others down, but by standing up for herself. And yet, she knew the story wasn't over. Liam appeared beside her, hands in his pockets. So, I guess Ryan's your new project now? Emma shot him a look. He's not a project, Liam. Liam sighed. I just don't get why you're giving him a chance after everything he did. Emma studied him carefully. Because I know what it's like to be written off. And maybe, just maybe, he doesn't want to be that guy anymore. Liam exhaled. I just don't want you to get hurt. Emma softened. I know, but I have to trust my own judgment. Liam hesitated before nodding. Okay, just don't let him walk all over you, Emma smiled. I think we both know that's not happening. Liam chuckled. Fair point. As he walked away, Emma felt a strange sense of peace. Things weren't perfect, and they never would be, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She had found her voice, and nothing, not Ryan, not Liam, not anyone, was going to take that away from her. That evening, Emma sat on the porch, staring at the fading sunset. The day had been full of unexpected turns, but she felt lighter than she had in weeks. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. You look like someone with a lot on their mind. Emma turned to see her mother standing by the door, watching her carefully. She sighed. Yeah. It's been different lately. Her mother sat beside her. Different how? Emma thought about it for a moment before answering. People are changing. Ryan, Liam, even me, her mother smiled. Change isn't always bad, sweetheart. Sometimes it's exactly what we need, Emma exhaled. I guess so. They sat in silence for a moment before her mother spoke again. I'm proud of you, Emma. Emma looked at her, surprised. For what? For standing up for yourself, for not letting people decide who you get to be. Emma felt warmth spread through her chest. Thanks, Mom. Her mother kissed her forehead. Any time. As Emma watched the last light of the sunset fade, she knew one thing for sure. Her story wasn't over. But for the first time in a long time, she was excited to see what happened next. The next morning, Emma woke up with a rare sense of calm. The storm that had surrounded her for weeks was finally beginning to settle. It wasn't that everything had magically become perfect, but she had learned something important. She had the power to decide who she wanted to be, and that changed everything. As she walked into school, she noticed the subtle differences. The whispers had faded, the lingering stares had softened. People still noticed her, but not in the same way. She wasn't an outsider anymore. She was just Emma, someone who had stood her ground and refused to be pushed out. At lunch, Sophie, Rachel, and Leah were waiting for her at their usual spot. Leah nudged her as she sat down. So, I heard Ryan finally talked to his old group? Emma raised an eyebrow. And? Leah shrugged. Nothing dramatic, just closure, I guess. He told them he's done playing their game, Sophie smirked. Guess that means he's officially been replaced as king of the school, Rachel nodded. And the best part? No one seems to care. Emma glanced toward the back of the cafeteria, where Ryan now sat. Not alone, but not with his old group either. He looked more at ease, like he was still figuring things out but wasn't as lost as before. She met his gaze briefly, and to her surprise, he gave her a small nod. Emma nodded back. It wasn't friendship, but it was something. A silent understanding that they were both moving forward. After school, Emma lingered at the playground, letting the familiarity of the place wash over her. She didn't expect anyone to show up, but after a few minutes, she heard footsteps behind her. Thought I'd find you here, Liam said, stuffing his hands into his pockets. Emma smirked. You've been doing a lot of thinking lately, huh? Liam chuckled. Yeah, I guess I have. He hesitated before continuing. I've been a pretty bad friend. Emma didn't say anything right away. She wanted to hear what he had to say first. Liam sighed. I should have stood up for you, and I definitely shouldn't have walked away when you needed me the most. Emma studied him for a long moment. Yeah, you should have. Liam looked down. I know saying sorry isn't enough, but I am. And if there's any chance we can be friends again, I want to try. Emma considered his words. She had missed Liam, but she had also learned to stand on her own. She wasn't desperate for his friendship anymore, and that made her decision easier. We can try, she said finally, but it has to be different this time. Real, Liam nodded. Yeah, real. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The world kept moving, and so would they. Emma had spent so much time fighting to belong, to prove she had a place. Now she realized she didn't have to fight anymore. She had already won. She was exactly where she was meant to be. As the days passed, Emma noticed more shifts. The tension that once surrounded her was gone, replaced by something calmer. It wasn't just about Ryan stepping back or Liam apologizing. It was about her own transformation. She no longer second-guessed herself. She no longer walked through the halls wondering if she belonged. One afternoon, as she packed her books in her locker, she felt a presence beside her. Looking up, she saw Ryan standing there, hands in his pockets. Hey, he said. Emma shut her locker. Hey, Ryan hesitated. I wanted to say something, since everything's different now. Emma crossed her arms, waiting. Ryan exhaled. I don't think I ever actually said I was sorry. Emma was surprised. No, you didn't. Ryan nodded. I am. Sorry, for everything. Emma studied him for a long moment. This was a side of Ryan she never thought she'd see, one that wasn't posturing, wasn't trying to dominate the conversation. He was just a person, standing in front of her, owning up to what he had done. Finally, she nodded. Thanks. Ryan looked relieved. Yeah, okay. I'll see you around. As he walked away, Emma felt something inside her settle. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about making him suffer for what he had done. It was about moving forward. And for the first time, she truly felt free. That night, as she sat on her porch, she reflected on everything. The journey had been tough, but it had made her stronger. She no longer needed validation from others. She had found it within herself. Her mother stepped outside, sitting beside her. You look peaceful, she observed. Emma smiled. I think I finally am. Her mother wrapped an arm around her. I'm proud of you, Emma. You never gave up on yourself. Emma leaned into her mother's embrace, feeling the truth of those words sink in. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new lessons, but she wasn't afraid. She was ready. The end.